I'm Mike Vaccaro, mindfulness-based counsellor and men's coach, and welcome to Presence, Healing and Purpose, conversations that inspire positive change in your world. Today, my guest is Dr. Jimi Wollumbin, and before I tell you about him and his fascinating background, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work, and pay respects to their elders and their customs, past, present, and emerging. So I'm going to read Jimi's bio. It's a bit longer than the ones that I've read here so far, but it's fascinating. It's very interesting. So Dr. Jimi Wollumbin. Jimi is not a GP or an MD, but a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. He's one of those rare individuals that is an expert in his field that also knows how to teach others. He has spoken at the United Nations, opened for Deepak Chopra, spoken alongside Bruce Lipton, and has even been personally insulted by the Dalai Lama. He teaches integrative doctors across America, sits on the faculty of the America Integrative Health and Medicine Association, and is a lifetime member of the Tibetan Medical Institute's Friends of Tibetan Medicine. Having joined in 2002 as a regular member, he is now also an esteemed fellow of the Australian Traditional Medicine Society. After completing his internship in Chinese medicine in Beijing Hospital in 2002, he has since completed 3 research exchanges at Ayurvedic hospitals in India, 2 with the Lama physicians at the Tibetan Medical Institute, and 1 with the Persian Hakims of the Unani Tib Hippocratic tradition, and 3 at the Trad Med department of the Mongolian National University in Ulaanbaatar, and a 2019 trip through Siberia to research shamanic medicine and present his work. Jimi's original degree at the ANU was in philosophy and Eastern religion, which is why Dr. Saroya Crouch describes him as a philosopher of medicine. He has written several books, none of which have been published, acclaimed, or even read yet. He is also the CEO and founder of One Health Organization, a wellness-based charity that has distributed over 10 metric tons of herbs and supplements to 100 locations across 13 countries since 2005. The esteemed father of functional medicine, Professor Jeff Bland, once publicly remarked, "Every time I hear Jimi speak, I think to myself, that's the kind of man I want to be when I grow up." He brings passion and enthusiastic hand gestures to every conversation he is a part of, including the one that we've had today. So I loved and enjoyed my conversation with Jimi. I'm a big fan of him and I follow him online. He's in my local community. And today I get to ask him a little bit about who he is and his background and his philosophy. We also talk about health and well-being, men, masculinity, the role of the masculine, reclaiming masculinity. We talk about testosterone. We talk about also perception and self-perception and the masculine role in society. And he gives some really helpful and practical ideas and practices that we can take away as men and bring into our life to help support our own journey and path of well-being. So I hope you find it as interesting and as fun as I did doing it, and enjoy the interview. So Jimi, thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
It's really lovely that you agreed to do this. As I was just saying a minute ago, I've kind of been following what you do online for a while, and you helped me and my partner Rihanna out with our daughter about 4.5 years ago. So when I reached out to you, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, I wonder if he has time. Like, he's super busy. And
Yeah, great. Oh, that's nice. Well, my process was when I saw the invitation of discussing men's health with Jimi and Mike. I was just like, that sounds like a product already. It's like Jimi and Mike. Jimi and Mike.
Sold.
Like, I've got to do this thing. Absolutely. It's like, who doesn't want to hear Jimi and Mike talking about men's business?
It does sound good now that you say that.
Doesn't it, Josh? It does. Yeah.
And I love your background there. What actually is that? Is that where all your herbs are stored?
Yeah, that's where the herbs go, in there.
Wow.
And they're deep drawers. They come anyway, they've got 3 little sections in them, and that's these ones are Chinese, but we had them all through Europe and the West as well. Beautiful mahogany ones you'll see in all over Europe, and they're a practical way to organize herbs compared to putting them all in big plastic storage tubs that you have to rush around through. And they're pretty, you know.
It looks beautiful. It's a great backdrop for a podcast, for a vlog.
Yeah. I should have said boss, actually, rather than pretty. They're boss as well, right?
Nice.
Since we're in the men's health, let's go with boss. Absolutely. It is a good backdrop for a podcast.
So, I mean, I was just also saying a minute ago, reading through your bio, how fascinating and interesting it looks. And I just thought maybe rather than, because I will have just gone through this in my introduction, but could you maybe say a little bit about how you got to where you are now, if that was the plan? Who was Jimmy back as a boy? All in 3 minutes, no.
Okay. No, there's not been some single kind of overarching mission statement and plan for me as a man and as a human being, as a soul, that I just knew in some early point, and I have set myself with my full masculine determination towards hitting that goal and that target, and I have worked unceasingly towards it. That story and the way of the mission and everything like that, yeah, I think it places unnecessary burdens upon men and upon women and upon the world as well. It's got its challenges. So no, that was not me. And where was I? To begin with, I was a very, very sensitive, exuberant but sensitive little boy, and didn't and wasn't particularly good at sports. In fact, I sucked at most sports. and it was Australia, and it was the 1980s, and it was Australia. And so a sensitive boy in Australia, in country Australia, in Wollumbar, which is like banana farmers and sugarcane farmers and dairy farmers. I was not the mold. You know, the mold was my image of masculinity that was held up for me was Bruce Willis, and kind of still is in so many ways. Bruce Willis and Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson, you know, like that's what men look like.
That's what you're supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't fit the mold, you know. And so my journey through masculinity has been one of coming from a place where I felt like I didn't have it in some way, you know. I mean, I was born with a penis and a pair of testicles, so I had the hardware, but I didn't feel like, you know, I had claimed it. So that's been a big part of the journey. So I came from as a sensitive little boy, really. And then my own process of healing and learning to just deal with the world and be in the world has what has led me on my journey. So it's my process of healing rather than I will achieve this target. It's just like maybe the target was I feel safe and okay in the world early on, you know. And my journey of healing myself as a glitchy, dysfunctional, beautiful little boy, you know, and all of the rest of those things is what I think has perhaps led me primarily on my journey. And that's led me on a journey of self-discovery and self-inquiry. It's led me to travel around the world and do all these cool things. It's led me to try all sorts of different plant medicines and ayahuascas and LSDs. It's taken me on, you know, all these adventures, right, into self-inquiry. But the adventures are born of the gaping wound of my own sense of inadequacy, of sensitivity, of not being a man, of not fitting in, you know, in so many ways. And it's the journey of embracing that, coming to terms with that and coming into relationship with that, not necessarily healing or vanquishing that, because there's still parts of me that are still very sensitive and hurt, and they always will be, and they're vulnerable, and that's okay. That's not the totality of me. I've also come into relationship with the other aspects of who I am, the other, you know, energies on my totem pole, or the other stars in my chart, or the other gods in my pantheon. Like whatever the language is that floats your boat. We're complex and contradictory beings, and so I continue to come into better relationship with my wound and my wounded child, as well as my playful and my sensitive child. And I think that's perhaps the personal journey overflowing into career, and the personal journey being powered by my own woundedness is perhaps one of the more honest answers I've given to a question like that about my bio, because normally they're a little bit more heroic, you know.
You got your Deepak Chopras and your Bruce Liptons and your Dalai Lamas, and it sounds, you know, it sounds really amazing. And
the bio, that's right. And I did write that bio myself. It's true, but all that amazing sounding stuff is like, let's not forget, I wrote it myself. I wrote it myself. No one else wrote the bio for me. I wrote it myself. And I put all my best and most impressive things all together. And every now and then when I get something more impressive, I add it into my bio as well. So, you know, we're amongst men, let's be clear. You know, it's the highlight reel. It's true, but it's a highlight reel.
And we do kind of do that, like, in a less professional kind of way. We kind of meet someone and go, oh, hey, here's the best of me. You know, what do you reckon? Am I in? Do you accept me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas in a way, we'd probably be better served by doing almost the opposite, of saying, look, kind of like I just did, of like, here's my glitchy parts. Here's my, you know, like, you know, totally. Like, I'm also this and this and this. Is that okay? Can we be friends? Like, yeah, okay. Because if you can be down with those things, then, you know, my strengths, well, they're self-evident. They're going to come out. You know, you're going to see those. But it's the shameful little parts that are tucked away that are the harder ones for us to own, and the more fulfilling and rewarding ones for us to be seen in and accepted in. You know? Absolutely.
And so when I hear that from you as well, anything inside of me that I'm protecting around that, I all of a sudden release that, and I feel a little bit safer myself.
Yes. Isn't that beautiful? When I hold when I ceased to just play the normal game, which I play all the time, I'm like, yes, I'm so impressive and good, and here's all the wonderful things that I've done. And when I hold my vulnerability in that moment, it gives you the safety of like, well, you're also just, you know, as well as all the wonderful things, you're also a nervous little boy, you've got a playful little boy, you've also got shy parts or parts of you, you know, all that stuff. And suddenly that's cool, and we can have a real exchange here while still without disowning the glorious parts, the strong parts, the warrior parts, or whatever those other things are.
Yeah. And there's something about like being in touch with and knowing and integrating that part of yourself. So you had to take all of those parts of yourself to the United Nations when you're in that situation. It's like that those parts are still there, or when you're speaking with or alongside of these people you mentioned, it's not like those guys come along with you.
Yes,
inside
absolutely.
Of you. And they're like, oh my God, here I am in like this moment of intensity.
Totally. And some of them will be just beaming with pride. Some of them will be terrifying and peeing their pants. Some of them will be sort of mocking, potentially, you know, inner critics. It's like, you're going to fuck this up. Or, you know, like, wait until they discover what a fraud you are. Yeah, you talk well, but, you know, like all those imposter syndromes, all those things, it's all in there. And it doesn't disappear with acknowledgement or success or opportunity. If anything, it just comes up with those things. Suddenly it's like, here we go. It's like, well, then the sensitive parts, the disowned parts, they can, like, if you haven't really found a way to tuck them in and to bring them along, then they just kind of erupt and come out sideways, which is the same with all of our parts, right? Like with our anger, our rage, our sexuality, our tenderness and our passion, you know, our assertion, like we either integrate them and we use them consciously, or we kind of disown them and they just, hey, pop out, you know, like a rogue erection, you know? It's like,
hello.
What embarrassing. You. That's right. That's what happens with the vulnerability or the ego or the anger. It's like a rogue erection in a high school maths class. It's like, not now.
Would you like to stand up and give us the answer to number 3, Jimmy? No, I'm going to pass, thanks.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's refreshing. Thank you for being that in this moment.
Yes, good.
And then so let's just sort of like, if I think about from that kind of world to where you are right now, what would you say is significant or noteworthy about your journey between here and there, where you were like, I really want to stand up and be a sort of a face of health for the community?
Well, I'm not sure I ever did, to be honest, quite in that way. I know I meant this is one of those opportunities where I meant to answer it in the affirmative and continue my hero story. But
you're not obliged to, by the way.
Yeah, since we're doing men's health, then one of the things I love about men's work is the sense of transparency and accountability, and the willingness to call bullshit on each other, lovingly call bullshit on each other.
Yeah.
And so that invites me not to just do the same kind of normal self-promotion bullshit.
Yeah.
So the question was, what was the thing that made me, I want to be a face of health? I don't think that was really that's not the right question. It wasn't the right call for me. There's been a range of different things that have called me to step up. Fatherhood has been a big one.
Yeah.
To step up and into the world, and to start to some of the men that might be listening to you will be familiar with the warrior, king, magician, lover model. And in terms of the different facets of our being, it's just a model, but the kingship model, the part of us that is the king, is the part that cares about the domain, that cares about more than itself, right? And the child doesn't have that. That's a mature masculine that comes in, that takes responsibility for something larger. In fact, takes responsibility for as much as that man is able to. Either me and my dog, or me and my dog and my caravan, or me and my family, or me and my family and my neighborhood, or me and my business, or me and the realm. The king takes care of the realm, right? So I think fatherhood, where suddenly you're a link in a chain, you're not the end of the evolutionary peak, when before this was me, before having children, I was all of my ancestors that all led to Jimmy. I was the evolutionary peak, the tip of the mountain. And then I had children, and it suddenly became like just a link in a chain. Yeah. That was sort of going, and maybe even in the other direction, just out down to the depths and continuing, my kids. And then I think maybe that gave me a little bit more sense of a genuine sense about a care for anything other than myself. Yeah. A certain degree. I'm still mostly self-absorbed and narcissistic, like the world can make of us, But I think that enhanced my sense of the sense of vision, of an inexperienced driver looks 10 meters in front of the car, and an experienced driver is looking, 100, 150 meters in front of the car. Right. And as a father, you start to look further ahead of just well, what about in 10 years? What about when my kids are teenagers? What about when my kids are adults? What about in 20 years? What about when they want to buy a house? And so, because that's all bound up with your community, then making the world, or your little slice of it, or how you interact with it, not making the world, that sounds a bit too heroic, a bit too hard out of reach, but making the way, your touch points with the world, putting them in order. Jordan Peterson would say about putting your room in order. He talks about putting your room in order. Yeah, getting that in order. I think fatherhood is perhaps the kick in the ass that perhaps meets that more significantly in a more real way. Than any of the other answers I would give you.
It also becomes highly impractical not to be in order once you're in that role.
Bloody oath, it hurts. Yeah,
it's just oh wow, this is against the grain. I better get that together.
Yes. Yeah.
Not to be amazing or
Yeah, you got to. When my wife got pregnant, we'd been dating for 6 months.
Wow.
And And I was still brokenhearted over my previous relationship and engagement, right? An engagement that had broken off. It still felt fresh. And then she got pregnant. And at that time, I was launching One Health, the social enterprise charity that, that you mentioned took me to the UN and a range of those other things, that was caring for the realm and doing stuff in the world for disadvantaged community groups. And in launching that, I had made this kind of vow of not working for money and not spending any money on food for a year, because I knew I had on the new incentive Centrelink scheme that they had, the NEAT scheme, I had just enough for my rent, really. And so I was just like, I need to put everything into this to launch it. And so I wasn't buying food, and sometimes I was doing romantic things like harvesting prickly pear or nopales from Vaucluse Park down in Sydney, where it was growing down there, and I would eat that. But a bunch of the time I was actually just dumpster diving. Wow. And so at the time my wife's belly was growing, I was working full time on a charity, living off $50 a week, and dumpster diving. And then after Tashi was born, we would take the prams around and we'd fill up. I'd jump into the dumpster at night and pull out the stuff, and we'd chuck it in underneath the bottom of the pram,
Wow.
And so the journey from there of I've been a free spirit traveling the world, investigating Tibetan medicine and whatever else I'd been doing, and I can just take care of myself, but with dumpsters, and government assistance, to I have to take care of the pregnant woman and the child that is coming. That's a major, ayahuasca's got nothing on that, I'd say. It's a major psychological initiation.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I've kind of had obviously different, but in a way archetypically similar experience of being a free spirit. Like I kind of spent my 20s working as little as possible and going on meditation retreats and doing that kind of stuff. And it was like, it was all what's going on in here. And then, and I had like quite a spiritual ego about that, even whether it showed or not, I don't know, but I felt like, I've really, realized something here, and I've got a bit of a grip on this. And then it was like fatherhood and actually being really seriously committed in relationship really tore down that idea. And then I had that experience of that becoming a parent was a more radical and deep spiritual practice or process than anything that I'd ever done before, regardless of what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of it's a rite of passage that has not been corrupted, right? Like some of our rites of passage, you could say, I became 18, and what'd you do? My mates took me out and I got pissed, and then we spent lots of money at the pokies.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's an effect. It's something, at least it's marked. I mean, good, it's marked.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's really achieves the transformation into adult consciousness that some of the previous rites of passage at that time did.
Yeah.
And so it's and the same with a lot of new aginess and a lot of spiritualness. It's just like you can end up with all this glitter and talk around stuff. And, I've been draped in saffron and all sorts of different things at various points in my spiritual yearnings and wanderings.
Yeah.
But fatherhood will not just come into that fluffy new age thing. Like it has nappies that stink and sleep deprivation and your own stuff, your own shadowy stuff, your own failures as a man, your own transgenerational human wounds, the whole bunch that you've sorted out and you've acted as a dam and that aren't passing on to the next generation. That's great. You can still have your spiritual pride. And then all the stuff that leaks through onto your kids and you watch it happening, that it's still passing, that the trauma, that your own inadequacies, your own hurts and wounds, that because you have to give everything, then the tragedy of being a father is that you give them your worst as well as your best, at times, right? Those times when you just haven't slept and you push to your absolute limit. And so that seeing your absolute worst as well as your best is not something that you can necessarily get in an ashram, in my experience, right?
Yeah.
And so the rite of passage, the gutsy, gritty. There's your woman. You know, if your woman is there, and that's not always the case, but if your woman is there as well, holding her through that process, seeing her in her glory, seeing her in her shit, seeing her look awful, seeing her behave terribly, seeing all the
whole thing,
having the fairy tale smashed, and wanting to it to be otherwise, eject, run away, something, you know, and not that is a rite of passage that I think is the king in us requires. Needs to be burdened over with those things. You can't, it's not without lifting the mantle of the realm in some way and falling underneath it, you know, like collapsing underneath the mantle of your realm, you know, your bills, your everything, is not to say that you're not a man if you have not had children. That's not what I'm saying at all, right? I'm saying that for those that are on that journey, it needs to be seen as a rite of passage and one of the ways in which the king can be awakened. And for those that aren't on that journey, then the king can be awakened in other ways. The burden of the realm and the death of boy psychology and the birth of man psychology, adult psychology, can still take place.
And for those that are unaware, some of these ideas that Jimmy's referring to come back to a book that's actually called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. If you want to look that up, I might even put a link to that in the details of this as well, because it's an awesome read for anyone interested. And you can walk away from an ashram or a monastery or a retreat, and you don't have you know, your child and your partner going, where are you? We need you. They'll be like, okay, we'll keep going. You just do whatever you want to do. See you later. So like there's almost like this privilege of and not even just a privilege, but it's like, I don't know what the right word for that is. But it's, you can get away with it. There's the pressure isn't there. You don't have that ongoing relationship there. So,
well, I guess that the broader piece on that is then just the way in which we are forged through adversity and challenge and strife. And that doesn't have to be with a pregnancy and a relationship and a child, because challenge, adversity, and strife will come for us, you know, one way or another. And I think for human souls, you know, this is I'm really enjoying having this conversation in a gendered context as men, and I think that's a really beautiful way to do it. But we could also just say it for human souls, is that the soul, in the same way that a plant, you don't get juicy tomatoes by putting them in the perfect environment with the perfect amount of water and the perfect amount of light every day and the perfect amount of nutrients they require. That is a hydroponic tomato, and it's always lacking a bit. Perfect tomatoes are the juiciest and the sweetest. They need to get frostbitten, dried out. They need to have insects come around and toughen up the plant. They need to go through those cycles. And that's what makes the juiciest tomato, right? And so the same for us. It's the tough love of life's challenges and adversity that initiates us, that takes us into our own underworld, that takes us on that journey. And I think it's really a central part of all initiations, right? Is the embracing of the learning how to suffer, the learning how to embrace adversity, because none of us want to, right? And in a conversation around men's health, then I think it's very easy for us to have that in a gendered term as well. And just like, as men, one of the crucial things of transitioning from being a boy to a man, and that doesn't just happen with age, that happens through initiation and change. You can be there's grey bearded boys in the world as well, obviously. Many of them are in charge of whole countries and companies as well. I have noticed.
Just had your image. There we go. You're back.
Sorry about that. Somebody just tried to call me. I sent them away.
That's okay.
So,
I mean, and all this kind of loosely relates to, but it'd be kind of good to get into it a bit more on the topic of men's health. So some of these things impact directly our own awareness of and ability to choose what's best for us in terms of our well-being, because like our initiation process, what's going on in society, and whether or not we've had eldership initiation and gone through rites of passage have an impact on the way that we see ourselves and how we treat ourselves and how we show up in the world. So kind of moving from this into more of a health-oriented discussion, what would you say is the biggest challenge that men face in health today? And is that related to those more traditional ways of developing as a man?
Okay, so that's as with all questions, then it contains the potential of assumptions inside it.
Yeah.
That I'd just like to tease out before I answer, because if someone was on the morning TV program, just for me trying to dig something down as low as the common denominator as I can, then the answer would tend to be something like prostate cancer. That would be the answer to your question, or something, right?
Yeah.
Because health equals the absence of disease. That's what health is in the popular understanding. So what's the greatest challenge for men's health? Obesity, heart disease, depression, prostate cancer. None of those things are the answer right here, because when we're talking about health here, then the tricky thing that we have to remind ourselves is we're not talking about disease, we're talking about health. And when you go and search the definition of health anywhere, you'll see the World Health Organization has defined it as health is not merely the absence of disease, but a dynamic state of physical, social, and emotional well-being, right? So if health is a dynamic state of well-being, then the question that you asked about merging those soulful things and men's health together suddenly becomes somewhat redundant, because men's health is the dynamic state of all of those things. To have what is the greatest challenge to men's health is the absence of a dynamic state of physical, emotional, and social well-being, right? And what is the challenge to that? Well, I think that it's a conversation that is definitely deeper than how many calories we eat, or how many trans fatty acids we have, or how much alcohol we drink, or any of those things. I think if we're going to come to a conversation about men's health, then the technical things we're talking about in public health, the social determinants of health is the phrase, the social determinants of health. And the social determinants of whether you're likely to get become obese and have prostate cancer and things like this, it's strongly determined upon your income, whether you're married and you feel loved, whether or not you're educated, whether you come from a poor neighborhood or whether you're living in a ghetto. All of those things are strongly determining your chance of depression, anxiety, heart disease, prostate cancer, obesity, fill in the blank.
Does that, can I just quickly chuck in a question? Please. There? Does that mean that if I live in a ghetto and I'm not married, like there's nothing I can do about my health and well-being?
No, it doesn't mean that. It means that, but it does mean that our conversation about health has become really, really skewed at present in our culture, right? And so I have to say health isn't the absence of disease, right? According to the WHO. So you just can't argue with it. What I would say is health is not the absence of disease, but the roaring presence of soul.
Yeah.
Right? That's health. So, and if you live in a ghetto, and I just gave married or unmarried as just a couple of unusual ones that go in there, because it does affect heart attack outcomes and recovery. The perception of how loved you are and things like this as well, it's not the sole thing, but it's one of many, right? And if you live in a ghetto, then there's still an enormous amount that you can do towards that. So if I tie that into men's health, I've got a beautiful case there's some research and a case study here about this.
Awesome.
Is that one of the major factors for men's health is our vibrant masculinity, right? That our vibrant masculinity in its core is intact, our mojo. And let's say that a marker of our mojo that can be inquired into and measured are our testosterone levels. Mm-hmm. So testosterone levels are what give us bone density. Testosterone levels are what give us muscle mass. Low testosterone is what gives us paunchy. High testosterone is what means we put a little bit more money into our wardrobe. High testosterone is what means that we're more generous tippers. High testosterone is what makes us more romantic as lovers. High testosterone means that we're less grumpy, right? Mojo, testosterone. I just busted several myths on testosterone right there as well, right? High testosterone does not make you aggressive and violent.
Yeah.
Total myth, absolute bullshit, awful, toxic myth.
I'm glad you said that.
It does not, right? So what we need to get is our mojo, right? In order to be healthy and have good bone density and be able to navigate well and all these things that are associated with testosterone, and testosterone just being a marker of mojo, right? Then one of the things for us is about our perception of where we are in the world, right? Against our peers. So we used to think that that the alpha male who had the highest testosterone was the alpha male because he had the highest testosterone.
Right.
And that's not true. The alpha male has the highest testosterone because he is the alpha male. And the day that he then loses a challenge to the beta male or males, and that someone else becomes the alpha male, he ceases to have the highest testosterone that day, right? So what I'm telling you is that if you take a series of workers and you make them feel lower on the social rung by telling them, even lying to them, you're below the average man, or the average man in the postal system earns this much money and you earn this much money, and it's a lie. It's going to make them feel lower on the rung. And as it makes them feel lower on the rung, they don't puff up and be like, yeah, all right, I'm in the bottom 6% of men. They don't do that. They go, oh. And when they go, oh, and they feel shit and they lose their mojo, their testosterone levels drop, right? And testosterone is one of the many markers for well-being and thriving for men. And so we can have it as a proxy for how you're doing. There's only one, you can't do it by itself. And it goes down through social comparison stress. So one of the things that is crucial for us as men is that when we feel like we're at the bottom of the hierarchy, we lose our mojo. When we lose our mojo, our sense of well-being and our actual well-being all the way through to bone density declines. Because at the bottom of the hierarchy is not where women traditionally have been selecting men from. They're selecting it from higher up. So if you're told I'm in the bottom, whatever, then biologically this is the evolutionary narrative. There's this sense of like, well, my genes are going to go extinct, or I'm screwed down here. This is not a good place, especially if you haven't reproduced. And the desire is I need to take care of business. I need to be better on my game. But the beautiful thing is there's not just one game in town, and there never was just one game. There's not just one hierarchy in town, right? There's not just a socio-economic and political hierarchy. That's the beautiful thing about human beings. There is a tiddlywinks hierarchy, and you can be the alpha male in the tiddlywinks world. There is a spiritual hierarchy. There is an artistic hierarchy. There is a chess hierarchy and a badminton hierarchy and a plumbing hierarchy. There's a Dungeons and Dragons hierarchy. You know, there's a banjo hierarchy. There's a whole bunch of different things. And
you're blowing my mind here, Jimmy.
Great. And what
I don't know if I can go on. No, I'm
you
just kidding.
feel like in your hierarchy that you feel like in the game of games that you've set out for yourself, that you say, I'm all right, thanks, mate, on my measure, not on yours. And that's not income or political influence. Like if I don't choose it to be, I don't have a particularly high income and I don't have high political influence,
Right.
But I define my realm as I do, and I define the rungs of the ladder as I do. And if on my definition, I'm ranking low, then I'm responsible for that. And my mojo goes down. And so as men, let's keep this gendered, as men, it's very important for us to be able to define the realm for ourselves, define the game that we're playing. It might not be about economics and politics. It can be about all these things.
Yeah.
And then for us to have a sense of if not mastery, you don't have to, it's not always the alpha. You don't have to be the alpha, but just that you're where you are is all right.
Mm-hmm.
You're not on the way you set everything up for yourself of what matters to you, what really matters. It's like gardening is what matters. That's what the sign of a good life, gardening. Well, in gardening, you're not in the bottom 6%. Then you've got your spring in your step when you're just like, check out my orchids, man. How you show me your orchids, I'm saying this in a kind of lighthearted and silly way.
Yeah.
But you get the point, right?
I get the point. I mean, like, it sounds like you're saying that the number one determinant, the number one factor is perception.
It's huge.
A man's perception of himself.
It's huge. We are a hive animal. We're a social animal. We're like bees, right? We exist in a tribe. We always have. We're like wolves, primates. You can't understand a tree by studying a leaf, right? You can't understand a whirlpool by studying a single H2O conglomeration. You just can't. And you can't understand a man by putting him in a jar alone. You have to see him in his clan, because this is where we exist. And your health or lack thereof is reflected upon not just your place in some hierarchical sense, but it's reflected by the health of the realm. Let's also go back to that king-like sense.
Yeah.
The idea that you can be healthy in an unhealthy realm, that you can be successful in an unhealthy community, in an unsuccessful community, that you can be thriving on a planet that's not thriving. That's an idea that as a man, I think is ludicrous and somewhat and abhorrent, right? But it's the popular idea that has come through our culture at present, and the wellness revolution has only fueled it, of just like there's an individualistic sense of success and health and thriving, right? It's like, I'm successful if I earn this much, I dress this way, and I don't have prostate cancer.
It's the one realm. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
And so, I mean, this is kind of another topic, but we're just getting this consistent message if we're tapped into certain media sources, certain social circles, and there's like a consistent message. So, in a way that's like almost an assault on perception, because so the Buddha says the mind is the forerunner of all things. So when you said basically that perception is the key to all of this, my mind was blown, because I'm like, yes, that agrees with my worldview.
yes. And so
go on.
One of my mantras is a poem that I wrote called The Truth Song of the Fire Dragon, because I'm born in the year of the fire dragon. And it's very short, and it just says like this. It's not spoken, it's roared. It says, I am what I say I am.
Wow.
I am what I say I am. That's the truth song of the fire dragon. That's one of my pieces, right? That I have to remind myself. And as a man, I think that's really crucial, because then regardless of there are things that are outside of our control. There always have been, and there always will be. And the heroic narrative that tries to paint otherwise is very painful and shame-filled. When it says, listen, everyone can do anything. Yeah. That's not really entirely true. And go walk around the slums of Mumbai and spread that around. Go and look at the people on the street there and spread it around. It's like, although it is technically true, I'm not sure it's the most healthy story for us to live by as a community, right?
It's so open to interpretation in erroneous ways that it's risky to put it that way, isn't it?
That's the point, right? Not that it doesn't have truth value, and not that at times what is not very liberating, but it's a knife that needs to be wielded carefully. And at the moment, it's just the one, like when they say, when the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And when everything is about personal development and personal autonomy and self-empowerment and self-inquiry, then you've got a hammer, right? You've just got one tool there.
Yeah.
And a part of the process here that the theme that's coming up for us today is that a part of being a man is giving a shit about something other than yourself. and giving a shit for as big as something as you can give a shit about.
And that's kingship. That's the archetypical kingship.
That's right. That's the realm. And it's not that you need to be, that doesn't mean that you must be politically focused. It's not that at all.
Yeah.
That the realm can be, there's spiritual kingship. There's all of those things, right?
Yes.
You don't have to have a big life and a public persona. None of that is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
We're talking about the change from just what's best for me and how do I thrive to I am a part of a tribe. How am I? And the king is the ultimate one of service, right? He's the ultimate servant, the servant to the realm. And in the same way with the alpha monkeys and the alpha apes, is that the average male does this amount in the primate troop of caring for others and picking their nits and grooming and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And the average female does significantly more, but the average alpha male does way more than the average female. The one that does the most caring, grooming, nitpicking, all that sort of stuff is the king in our primate piece. The one that does the most service, the most service. So we've got this idea of a toxic alpha male, which is not the alpha male. That's the toxic alpha male. It's the dark king. It's the wounded king.
It's like the opposite. It's like the person that's the most all about me.
Yes, that's right. And those monkeys, they never stay. They stay for a period of time, but they're not stable because they're mean and selfish. And however tough they are, 2 quite tough monkeys or 3 quite tough chimps, they can always take him out as soon as they decide, this is enough.
Yeah, I've had enough.
He's never tougher than 3 of them. No matter how tough he is, he's not tougher than 3 of them. So never stays.
Yeah.
So stable reigns, stable domains, stable systems, not just biological systems, but stable systems have a way of circulating resources so that it doesn't just accumulate at the bottom on a like graveyard of those that are being crunched behind so that you can ascend. So I'm all for, I think the alpha concept and alpha male concept is something that needs to be reclaimed. And like the word cunt or, like whatever, where women are reclaiming that word, right? It's just like, and saying, breathing sanctity into it. This word means well. It's the same as kundalini. It is sacred, and this is my sacred cunt, and I'm taking that back. Alpha is a beautiful thing, and but it's not the way we've been led to believe. Testosterone is a beautiful thing. It's not the way we've been led to believe. Masculinity is a beautiful thing, and it's not the way we've been led to believe. A patriarchy and patriarchal values are beautiful things, and they are not the way we have been led to believe. It's just that we have seen in our unhealthy culture, unhealthy versions of those, broken versions, dark versions, wounded versions. But we have also seen broken, dark, and wounded versions of the feminine in all of those ways. Because inside an unhealthy culture, there's no health. And we don't create enough healthy adult women and healthy adult men. We create a sibling society. That's another book to look into, the sibling society, right? And so we're talking about initiation here.
So on point, Jimmy. I love the way that you framed all of that and brought it to this idea of reclaiming, because it has been a common theme, like things that I've seen, probably more so things that I've seen publicly than anywhere else, but around sort of naming and shaming things in alignment with ideas of alpha male or masculinity or testosterone. And so to take this idea and go, hold on a second, if we can't name that, work with that, use that, if that's now shameful, that leaves us in a very risky situation as men. If we live in a world where that becomes taboo.
Incredibly risky. In fact, if you were to walk along the street today and ask, in a Western developed country at least, let's just say Australia, walk along the street and say, I want you to just give me associations when I say the word feminine. You say, feminine, caring, cooperative, generous, nature, intuitive, all of these things, right? And then you say masculine, dominant, aggressive, technology, competitive, not collaborative. There's just the good stuff. Basically, it goes feminine equals good, masculine equals bad in our associations.
Yeah.
At
this point, into the subconscious, there's just like green and gone. Red. Yeah.
Because we've got a fractured lens, and we've swapped it around. You can say, well, we were used to do that with original sin and women. It's like, yes, true. But it doesn't mean it's any better now, just saying, well, like now we just swap it around and say, oh, we got it wrong. The bad guys are actually the ones with the penises. The good ones are the ones with the vaginas. That's the same story, man. The same story. That's not it. The bad guys, good guys, the victims and the perpetrators, the who's right and the who's wrong, that's the cracked lens. That's the wound at the heart of our culture, right?
It's a very addictive lens.
It's a very addictive lens, but it's very toxic. It's one that I don't want my little daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, or my 14-year-old son to ingest. Either of them.
Like, so that blaming mentality is what's at the essence of that. And that's all about not taking responsibility.
Yes.
So when we have that narrative, we can't actually take ownership and responsibility and then become what we want and need to be in the world.
And another way to frame that as well, I think that's absolutely true. But another way that is perhaps more accessible for some people is that when we end up in a victim state, right, we've lost our power in that moment. Somebody has used power over us, in some way, or we have consented unwittingly, or in a process that's left us feeling disempowered. One or the other, right? We've lost our power, and then when we have that perception of having lost our power by what happened, right? Then in that moment, to regain some power, is blame helps us, and anger, it can be a normal and healthy part of a process to be like, fuck you, and to have blame. I'm the victim here, you're the bad guy because you came into my house and stole my stuff and beat me up. Like, okay, that can be really healthy to get you out of trauma and huddling under the bed. But if you stay there, which is what our culture is encouraging us to do, it's not like the 7 stages of healing trauma. It's the 2 stages. Get up and get angry. Stay woke, stay angry. The woke movement. Stay woke, stay angry. No, that's not the hero's journey. That's not what our old cultures tell us. That's a part of our young, broken sibling society, teenage psychology thing. You don't stay there. So you don't stay inside the, am I a victim or am I a perpetrator?
Yeah.
Which one is this? It has to be, is this good or evil? And are you good or evil? Which one? Because there's only 2. And so we have to figure out each time who's right and who's wrong, who's good and who's evil. Yes. Because we've got that cracked lens. And when you're doing that, then you rob yourself of power, right? By staying in the trickle feed of power that victimhood gives us. It gives us a certain amount of power, this passive, leaky, toxic power. But it never can really return the power to us that we dream of, because returning the power to us that we dream of entails responsibility, which is what you were saying.
Which is a more exponentially available form of power. Like as we do that movement to responsibility, we then like increase capacity every time we do it. Increase.
Yes.
And then you also made me think of the Karpman triangle from looking at psychology. So the other part of that triangle would be the savior or the rescuer, which, you know, because that, you know, us Byron Bay folk, that might seem a bit more, I don't know if I stereotype Byron Bay too much in these talks, but anyway, you know, like to then go and be someone's savior can also be as sort of limited in a way. Like there's like a transcendence of all three of those roles.
Yes. Or there's in the full pantheon of gods inside every man and inside every woman, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about men. The full pantheon of gods inside every man. The Apollonian, the Dionysian, the Hadean, you know, all of these different things, the underworld gods, the dark and roiling, you know, the sexual gods, the angry gods, the power-hungry gods, the beneficent gods, the, you know, the soft and tender gods, the wise gods. Then because we are the full zodiac, because you are every star sign and every planet in a unique mix, but all of them, because you have all of the elements, the fire, the water, the air, and the earth inside you, then you have all of those energies and forces within you, right? That whole drama playing out inside you. And so whilst the savior or the rescuer is like, well, when a kitten is getting sucked down a flood drain, and it's just going under, it's great to be the savior. That's what you got to be. Dive on in. There's nothing wrong with being the savior in that moment. Getting caught in the savior pathologically as your only tool, like the hammer and the nail, the only tool of how I get love is by rescuing people, and that's how I get empowerment is by finding drowning kittens. And then in that moment, through projecting it onto them and feeling like, you know, like if that puts them a little bit lower down. You find the drowning kitten, and then you don't have to hold your own drowning kitten.
Yes.
Right? You suddenly just feel like I'm the savior.
Yes.
But actually, the reason why the savior complex or the rescuer complex is so toxic is because, well, you're also a drowning kitten, man. Like, put your own face mask on and own it. Like, I'm as well as being a fire dragon.
Yes.
I, Jimi Wollumbin, am a drowning kitten as well.
Yes.
I'm also, you know.
Yes. So it's not neglecting our own vulnerability.
No.
And also
you have capacity to move. You can move around the zodiac. You can move around those roles. So just don't get stuck in one. Get stuck in one, in that particular one. And it's only one. That's just one model. But stuck in that is any one of those things you get caught in. Victim, perpetrator, savior. Get out of the triangle, man. It's much bigger. It's not a triangle. It's a zodiac. It's Absolutely. A mandala. There's a lot more to choose from than those three options. They are way too limiting.
Right. That's it. And so I think that model, the purpose of that model is it's called the drama triangle. So what it's saying is that when we fixate on one of those, and I remember I did a post a while back, I said, which one of these three do you think you're embodying in your relationship to this COVID phenomenon right now? Because most of what I was seeing online from people was one of those three scenarios there.
Yes.
But that's a whole nother topic altogether. So I'm just thinking about everything that you've said so far, which is so juicy, every single little bit of it. And we could probably pick apart each one of those for a long time if we had to. But I'm just thinking, like, looking practically, something almost that people could take away and sort of work with and infuse into their life. On the level of what you said was that a great deal of this is around perception. So what can we do, in your opinion, as men around perception to embody health and well-being more, something more practical?
Okay. Firstly, I would say every single thing that I have said so far is deeply and profoundly practical.
Yes.
And to think that narratives, myths, and soul and these big pictures are not practical, and practical is what mushrooms do I, poke up my rectum, and, how many push-ups do I do in what position? I don't buy into that's practical, and the soul stuff is impractical.
Yes.
The most practical thing for us as social beings is going to have to be able to deal with social dynamics, and that involves narratives and myths and soul as well. Because man is the wolf of man. What's going to kill you is that you don't know how to surf in society. And how do you surf in society is you got to learn, and it's through these weird stories and myths and rights and laws. So first, I want to say that stuff is deeply practical.
Yes.
Like as a father, what do I need my son to know? It's just like, well, I don't know if he really needs to know algebra. Who knows? Because the world is changing. Yeah. What do I know that he needs to know? It's just like nothing at that level so much, but broadly, these meta skills are really crucial, right? So as men, I think those things are really crucial. But when you're saying this about practically as men, then are you saying what can we bring the conversation to how important it is to do exercise and stuff to maintain your mojo and to build your chi? Is that where you want to take this?
No, I didn't really mean that. I think like what you said is true. Everything that you've put forward is practical. And I think like conversationally, it's kind of like splayed out in different ways. So I guess I more meant if we could bring some of that to something like if someone wanted to write down a takeaway of, I'd really like to focus more on this in my life to help. Yes. More like a practice or a focus point.
Okay, great. I've got one then. So if we just remember that health is not the absence of disease, right? But according to the WHO, a dynamic state of social, mental and physical well-being, right? Then you've got health is well-being, right? Health is that's what the WHO is saying. And then if you look a little closer, you're like, health is well-being. And what's well-being? They're synonyms, aren't they? You're like, and then like, oh, sugar. We've just said health is health, in a fancy sort of way. It's like survival of the fittest, where fitness is defined by surviving. That's what Darwinian, survival of the survivors. That's what that survival of the fittest is, with fittest. You're just like in this little conundrum there. So health is health. Health is well-being. But then to get around that, they say well-being, when you look at it and all is said and done, then, and the studies have looked into it really deeply, well-being is a life well lived. Well-being is a life well lived. Well-being is what matters. So as a man, you need to ask yourself, what matters to you? What matters to you? And what is a good life to you? As a Maori man, right? As a man of Chinese descent, right? As an Italian man, as a poor man, a rich man, a single man, an old man, a young man, whatever, right? Ask what, and obviously also as a woman, right? But I'm talking to the brothers here.
Sure.
Well-being is a life well lived. Well-being is what matters to you, right? And so then practically, one of the things that you can do, and I've done this with disadvantaged communities where they've had a lot of health problems and a lot of well-being problems, like asylum seeker communities, right? I took them through this process, and we spoke about some of those things that we've talked about here, and then said, what is a good life, right? What's a good life? And according to the Fijian or the Samoan community or the Persian community, and they give me different answers, right? And so I would write all those things down. They're like, oh, it's this and this. It's, time in the ocean. So it's the South Pacific Islanders, it's like, it's, time with my God, says a different set, right? Because the ocean is sort of, like that.
Yes.
Different. And you put all those things down. Time with my pets, it's about being able to buy the good things, all this sort of stuff. And then in the end, when you put all of these things down that matter, then you start to group them together into some clusters, right? And you see themes are happening. And you say, all this stuff comes down to kith and kin. Let's put kith and kin down. And we get that as a big subject. All this stuff comes down to connection to the earth, right? That's a different category. All these things are time in nature and going for bike rides and all. And you create a well-being wheel, right? And your well-being wheel has as many spokes on it as you want, but between at least 5 and sort of 10 or something like that, somewhere between that, 5 and 10. And those categories are the things that matter to you. You've made it yourself. You know, if you made it in this way. And then you measure yourself. You measure yourself. No one else assesses you. You measure yourself on each of those categories and you see which are the short spokes. And you say, my short spokes, I've got high well-being in terms of time with family and income, right? And physical health and nutrition. And I've got low well-being when it comes to time alone and time in nature, or, you know, fill in the blanks, whatever your particular things are.
Yeah.
Right? And then in order to maximize, to get your well-being wheel and your system and your domain and your pantheon in order, then those areas, those short spokes, they're gods within that you are not honoring.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be honored. And that's where your investment goes. And when you do that and you push those up and you're like, I've got, you know, I give myself a 3.5 out of 10. And as you mark the well-being wheel, you can just give them at ratings, and then 10 is right at the rim and 0 is right at the dot. And then that's how you get your short spoke. I've got 3.5 on time alone and 2 in time on nature. Then those are the ones, in order to lift up your well-being, specifically for you, because you're really high in physical health or exercise, you focus on those 2, and then you say, this is what I need to do. I'm already kicking goals on those ones. How's that for a practical answer that holds together some of what we're talking about? Is that what you meant? That's
beautiful. I mean, it takes a really holistic look, and it's something that if someone had time, they could go away and sit with themselves and get a good holistic picture of where they're at, which is fantastic. Yes. And I think if you take that along this running theme through everything else we've said, which is around perception and like having a sense of your realm where you are not at the bottom of the rung, and owning that and bringing that to mind as well. I personally found that really on point and useful as well. And maybe we could, if you're interested, mention, because with all of the herbs behind us, is there anything for men in particular around herbs that you would suggest? Or is it too specific to where they're at and what they're going through?
It is very specific, right? Yep. It is very specific. And so I guess one of the things that is perhaps just to hand over a little bit of extra information here is that men often get quite focused on yang tonics and boosting testosterone levels.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, I take my tribulus and my ashwagandha and my ginseng and, you know, those kinds of things, the male herbs, you know, and that's cool. Those are really good and good reasons. However, the whole world is suffering from estrogen poisoning, right? The whole world. So women are suffering from estrogen poisoning, and that is causing them to have breast cancer and endometriosis and changes in their well-being and their state of mind. Alligators are suffering from estrogen poisoning, and that's causing their average testicle size to deplete. Shellfish are suffering from estrogen poisoning, and that's changing the way in which they breed and move. Men are suffering from estrogen poisoning, and that's causing them to have more visceral adiposity, belly fat, and that creates more estrogen as well. And it's causing them to have prostate cancer. It's causing them to become grumpier. It's caused, you know, all these problems, inflammatory cycles with estrogen, because a range of the pollutants that we've put in the world and a range of just the, you know, the plastic little things and stuff that we touch behave like estrogen.
Right.
So pushing up testosterone alone as a man is not the single factor of men's health that most podcasts sort of focus upon.
Yeah.
And that a lot of men focus upon. That's an important one. I'm not downplaying it. It's like,
sure,
mojo's crucial. I just sung that up. But in order to balance the equation a little bit more, is that in addition to your gonadal vitality, that solar energy in your balls, the thunder in your balls and the lightning in your marrow, right? That, the yang, the vitality, that's important. It needs to be safeguarded. You need to safeguard that with exercise, muscles build yang and testosterone, right? Doing the haka builds yang measurably. Power poses. Your testosterone goes up just from doing that.
Yeah.
Holding a doll, your testosterone goes down. Being in a long-term monogamous relationship, your testosterone goes down. Having children, your testosterone goes down. Aging past the age of 30, your testosterone goes down 1% every year. So we do need to safeguard that. However, on the other side about herbs, just to give you an extra download here, helping your liver to metabolize and process estrogens, toxins, and the toxic world at large is an undersung and crucial part of men's health. Because often when I have clients who will have, you know, like erectile dysfunction, something that is you can think of as associated with our yang qi in that regard, associated with our solar kind of vital phallic vibes, then sometimes often their testosterone levels are great. It's that their estrogens are flooded. They don't need more testosterone. They need their estrogens to be able to drain away. Okay. They need to be able to metabolize that. So that means liver health is really important for men, and it's been underbaked. Liver health. And so too much coffee, too much booze, too much beer filled with hops, hops, really not man-making. The reason, you've heard the expression brewer's droop, right? I always thought it was from drinking too much and not being able to get a hard on. It's that there's so many phytoestrogens in hops that the brewer who was handling it all the time was permanently flaccid, right? And the women that were handling the hops all the time all had menstrual irregularities and things went crazy like that. Hops is an intense plant. It's a beautiful plant. But I'm saying liver, take care of the liver, keep your alcohol and your caffeine in check. And how do you do that? You only do that by being on point in your own journey as a man, because otherwise, if you don't feel on point in that, then you need to get quite drunk every night and you need to get quite caffeinated every morning just to survive in your own little hell realm of your well-being wheel being short on several spokes, being in the wrong mechanism. Fit. It's a coping mechanism, right?
Self-soothing.
So it goes together. Those things go together, but there's a practical piece about liver support is really important, and caring for your liver through healthy diet and reduced exposure to toxins and having those things is a part of how we should see our caring for our vital fire as well, and our virility as men. Amazing.
That's so helpful, and everything that you've shared with us today has been interesting and helpful. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking with today, Jimmy. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure, mate.
So I'll just give you a little opportunity. What have you got baking at the moment? I know you got this Patreon account. There's 3 offerings on there. Is that right?
Yes. So broadly, I have been, a therapist primarily for all my adult life. And now that I've got a bit of chrome in the muzzle here, not grey, as I tell my kids, like the Vikings. It's going chrome.
It's going chrome, mate.
So now I've got a bit of chrome going. I'm stepping into teaching more, right?
Amazing.
And so through this exchange, so if someone really loved the ideas and the vibe of what they've learned from me today, then where I would direct them is to become my patron, father, patron. With patriarchy. Just think about that word, patriarchy. Patron, it's the same. Pattern, patron, father. Father is pattern, is spirit. Mater is mother, is matter, right? Become my patron on Patreon. Become a patron, and put down $2.50 a week, or $10, or $2.50 a month, or $10 a month, or some particular thing, and join one of these schemes, one of these programs where schemes. Join one of these programs where you can hear me raving like this more frequently. And if this, and then there'll be a whole bunch of practical things about their health, and that's where they can do it in Patreon. Otherwise, if they say, I don't like the idea of money being attached to that, come and follow me on Facebook or Insta, and you can get a certain amount of content that's for free there. And hopefully I'm going to woo you into coming into my apprentice lounge, which is where I put the deepest stuff as well, where we have these deepest dives.
Yeah. And so for those who haven't had exposure to Jimi other than through this, following those accounts, I've seen nothing but fascinating, helpful, and interesting. They're kind of like blog posts in many ways, what you often post on there, looking at such a broad array of topics, from sort of what's happening in the world to health and social issues. And so it's really amazing. And a lot of it is very clever, very helpful, and really well researched as well. So highly recommend heading to Facebook or Instagram and checking that stuff out as well.
And we get low down and dirty and talk about prostates and all the other stuff that you're not meant to as well. So it's also grounded in the body and in health, because that's my gig, obviously. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to do both of those. Yeah.
Jimi is no bars held. I emailed beforehand, say, is there anything you don't want me to go on? Anything too sensitive is? And the answer was, anything goes.
Bring it on.
So I love and appreciate that. It's been really enjoyable for me. So thanks again.
Next time, let's do something on the shadow and the male G-spot, or something like really, really
something juicy.
Totally. I'm trying to think of something that would normally be objected to. But yes. Thank you for going there with me, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jimi. Thanks for tuning in to this month's episode of Presence, Healing and Purpose, conversations that inspire positive change in your life. If you found this interesting and enjoyable, feel free to subscribe, like, share it with your friends. And also, I just want to let you know that this is one of 4 offerings that I send out for free on a monthly basis in my newsletter, The Monthly Value. If you'd like to receive that, go ahead to the description and you'll see a little subscribe link to The Monthly Value. See you next time.